I'm Gavin Hodgson from Granger's Fishing and Casting Instructor, and I'm here to talk to you about fishing, a few different methods, a few different things to learn, techniques and practices to help you along. When it comes to saltwater fly casting, sadly we're not always in the situation to teach it. In other words, we're still teaching on a trout water, but I get a lot of guys who are booking a trip and they're going bone fishing or tarpon fishing, or they're just going bass fishing in the UK, or any kind of shore fishing with a fly. And that kind of fishing commands slightly adapted techniques. I won't say it's different casting because it's not. Good fly casting is good fly casting. But it means you've got to always consider the elements. You've got to always consider that we're going to be casting in strong winds, we're going to be casting big flies, and it just makes that fly casting a little bit trickier. So the rod I've chose today to demonstrate this is a 9-foot number 8. That's the starting point for saltwater rods for most people. 9-foot number 8 does most things. It can cast a decent sized bait fish pattern or a heavyish crab, and it does most things for most people. Obviously, once we start considering big flies and you know, chasing bigger species, then we need to increase the rod size. But a number 8 is a good starting point, and it's a good size for teaching. It means people don't get too tired. So when I'm teaching with a number 8, I can expect people to last the distance and continue casting for an hour or two and still be okay. So we've already talked about double hauling, but double hauling is very important in saltwater fishing. For distance, for casting in the wind, and for getting that penetration of the loop into situations where we need the fly to turn over. Getting that fly to turn over is something that the fly line manufacturers have given a lot of thought to. They've produced fly lines which have an aggressive forward taper and a much stiffer coating and core, so that helps us to get the fly to really thump over in situations where a trout line would just struggle to do that. So when we've got the right kit put together, I guess one of the things I should talk about is how to start off, and talking about bone fishing, because bone fishing is a very popular part of fly fishing nowadays. So we're on the boat and we're stood on the front of the deck, and there's a guide poling and looking for fish and hopefully doing his job back there. What I always try and get people to do is hold the fly. So we hold the fly in our finger and thumb. That gives us the leader length, and what I like to have out the rod tip is enough fly line to load the rod. If we start that situation where we're searching for fish and the guide spots the fish and all you have out the tip of your rod is a yard or even less, a foot or two of fly line, then we're going to get ourselves in a real sticky situation where we can't cast quick enough because we can't feel a load on the rod yet. So what I like to try and get people to do is do what I do and have enough fly line out there to load that rod immediately. And you'll learn it in time, but depending on the length of the skiff, depending on the length of that boat, what I like is a piece of fly line that's hanging behind me, down the side of the boat. If I can demonstrate that, down the side of the boat, so we've got a bit of a loop of fly line, and then I've got that trailing the water behind me, ready for when we spot a fish. When I've got that fly line there are so many instances where I can cover a fish immediately. Guide spots a fish, pick it up, we're out there, and there's a fly in front of it. Saves us any false casting. Don't waste time in bone fishing. If you waste time in bone fishing, you've missed an opportunity. So similarly, when your guide has spotted a fish, and let's say it's 20 or so yards away and it's leaving the flat, then if we've got all this fly line here to use, we've got enough fly line to load the rod, I've got the line trapped under my finger, and I can throw this into a back cast. If you watch the hand movement, up and over, and then I'm casting immediately. And I've got enough line to load that rod so that I can cover the fish very quickly and hopefully get a hook up immediately. With bone fishing, once the fish are moving, they're feeding, but they're moving. They're feeding, they're moving. They're always on the move, and you've got to get that fly in front of them very quickly. Another interesting side to the casting for saltwater, which I find very useful for people, is side casting. When we're taught trout fishing, we're taught very sort of regimental almost, textbook styles, up and over the top. Now this is useful, but in saltwater fly fishing, there's no advantage to that. Very rarely have we got trees to worry about. We're often out on a shoreline or out on a flat where the only thing we've got to worry about is the wind. So side casting helps also cut beneath the wind, but what it also does is it puts that presentation in at a very low height, a height where fish hopefully aren't going to see what's going on. And many times I've been chasing, permit are known for this, and they've gotten me every time, but many times I've been chasing a permit and I've made a cast, and as soon as I make that cast, I know I've done it wrong. I've lifted the fly line too high, and the glare of the fly line flashing against the sunlight in the sky, that's enough to send those permit running. So picking them off the water and keeping it quite low is very useful. And if we can double haul and side cast at the same time, then we can cut in with a very low loop. That, to be honest, works every time. Bonefish don't see that thing coming, you know. Permit get the better of all of us, but if you can adopt that side cast where it's almost your natural cast when you're on the flats, then that will give you a huge advantage. The other thing to add to side casting, we're always in a situation where the wind is wrong, and whereas in trout fishing we can move around the bank and say, well, I'm going to try fishing on the far side, it's much easier. With saltwater, it's very much you've got to take that opportunity. So you'll see a fish, and if you can't cover that fish, that's a huge opportunity missed. You may pole a flat or wade a flat for a long time before we actually see anything to cast at. But being able to just suddenly turn around and land that fly on the fish is very useful. And I like to teach people back casting to fish, which a lot of people would do this for a trout and cast up and down the river under trees and such. But when you're using a heavy rod, especially when it gets up to tarpon sizes like a 10, 11 or a 12 weight, then we need to think about the back cast and cover fish the other way. So if I was to cast a fish that way direction, I'd be able to cast that direction and lay the fly line out and make that my forward cast. So very quickly, the guide spotted fish behind me or something, and then I've covered that fish. And I find if guys can do that, it really does double their catch rate on certain flats. Certain flats where we're on massive flats, walking for hours, and we're not always approaching fish. Fish are often coming up behind us.